Hey, women of welcome. Good morning. It is Tuesday morning, and we are going to be talking this morning about some of our experiences at the border with some of our friends that went with us. And today I'm going to be talking with Jessica Honneger from Noonday. And if you're not sure what Noonday is, I want you to hop over there and follow them because we feel like Noonday is on the prevention side of equipping vulnerable women to not have to migrate. And so I'm so excited to talk with Jessica today about her experience at the border because we are gearing up for another trip in June. And so here I'm going to let Jessica. And so, anyways, I'm already excited because it gives me a great excuse to dress up and wear my Noonday jewelry. Hi, Jess.
Hey, Bri, looking beautiful as always.
Oh, thanks. That's so sweet. This is my daughter's favorite piece from Noonday. So I had
It's a good one.
Yeah, I had to wear it. So how are you?
I'm good. I'm doing great. I'm just excited to be talking to you.
This is fun. Okay, so I was trying to just preface a little bit. We're going to talk about your experience at the border because you just recently went with us to the border. And being the founder of Noonday, I was just talking about how Noonday we feel is just this beautiful, uh, it's this beautiful piece of the puzzle while we are always wondering why people are migrating and why they're forced to leave. And a lot of that is economic disparity. A lot of that is, most of that is forced migration. And so we see Noonday as just this beautiful piece of the puzzle that is on the preventative side of the need to migrate. And so if you are not following Noonday, head on over there, follow Noonday, follow Jess, because there's just a lot of beautiful work of serving vulnerable women and equipping them to be sustainable on their own. So is there anything you'd like to add to that about Noonday real quick?
Yeah, it's funny. I put these earrings on today without even thinking about how I'm hopping on with y'all, but these are handmade porcelain earrings, and they're actually handmade by refugees that are on the border of Myanmar and Thailand. I'm sure many of y'all know that Myanmar is back in a civil war after 30 years of democracy. And we actually in Austin employ Burmese refugees to package and ship everything. And then we work with refugees on the border. And, that displacement, so much of this has to do with not having access to dignified work. It's often fleeing violence and oppression. And so Noonday really comes around on that prevention side where we can create economic opportunity for some of the world's most vulnerable so that they aren't ending up in refugee camps or they aren't ending up, waiting on the border of in shelters. So I love getting to be here with you. I loved getting to visit the border with you. And I think the more that I do trips, the more I'm convinced about the work that Noonday gets to do, because, we say we want to be on the side where we're not telling stories, like we're preventing the stories. So we just want to celebrate stories of dignified work through jewelry and accessories and home accessories.
I love that because it leads me to my first question about you, and is you have traveled all over the world visiting people who are in very vulnerable situations, and they're in countries that are unstable or going through really violent civic and public and breakdown. And why did you say yes to going to the border? I mean, there's all kinds of places around the world which you have been to. And then I was like, with Jamie Ivy, I was like, you want to go with us to the southern border? Why did you say yes out of all the places you've been? I mean, going to the border isn't really the sexiest place to go. Why'd you say yes?
Well, I go to a lot of unsexy places. Those tend to be my favorite places to go to. And, this really is my backyard. I live in Texas, and I grew up with friends. My dad was always hiring people that were immigrants from Mexico primarily. And I had heard that things had gotten really dire on the border, but I think that this might be surprising for y'all to hear, but I can definitely struggle with compassion fatigue, where I am like, gosh, we work in Afghanistan, we work in Haiti, we work in India, Peru, Guatemala. I mean, these are all places that, you know, have been, you know, just really wreaked havoc and violence, political violence and oppression. And I think for me, I'm always needing to look for ways to widen my circle of compassion and remind myself that compassion isn't a limited resource. Compassion isn't something that can run out, it's regenerative. And I just was so thankful for your invitation so that I could go and widen my circle of compassion and just be that ministry of presence to people. And certainly, I think especially what I wasn't expecting, you know, because I do speak Spanish and was able to get to know some of the people that we visited and just sit and hear their stories.
Yeah.
You know, there is something about a hope, you know, there's something powerful in people just getting to share their story. And, you know, sharing our story often can extinguish some of the shame that we attach to our stories. And we all have shame attached to our stories, but certainly people in vulnerable situations carry a lot of shame. So I think too, I just being able to be there and create a space where people could share their stories, and being an American, which they were, you know, not being granted access to America. I think as an American, being able to create a space of hope for people was really powerful for me as well.
Well, you got to show up in a different way because the language wasn't a barrier for you. So you got to kind of pick up on some of those nuances that some of the translators kind of have to skip over sometimes because we're just in a rush and there's just a fire hose of information. And you got to just show up in a very different way and kind of get a little even insider scoop into that, some of the stories. So that was beautiful. And just did show up in a beautiful way. I loved it. What was one of the things that really stuck with you? What was one of your biggest takeaways? So if someone were like to ask you, what was your big story from the border? What do you talk about now that you've been back?
You know, my business partner and I really have a passion for children with special needs in vulnerable communities. My business partner has a son with Down syndrome, and we've done a lot of work with an organization called Akisa in Uganda that's actually starting a worldwide movement to help train up communities in vulnerable places to destigmatize kids with special needs. And it happened to be one of the days that we were doing an art project with the various immigrants, or not immigrants, migrants. Thank you. They weren't yet immigrants. So I sat and talked to one woman, and we were just painting an ornament together, and she just began to share with me her story. And I mean, at the very beginning said, you know, my son died 3 months ago. And I just thought, did I hear this right? And, you know, she began to just open up her phone and show me pictures of her child that looked like, she said he had cerebral palsy and other complications as well. And her community in Honduras had faced a lot of gang violence. She also showed me some of those traumatic pictures as well. She had obviously been collecting evidence in Honduras that she could present at the border to be able to claim asylum. Right. So she took a bus with her, you know, little boy, hoping that once she got, you know, to the border, she would be granted. He needed some life-changing surgery. And, you know, of course, America's not letting anyone in. So she found, thankfully, a beautiful shelter, definitely my favorite shelter that we visited. I think about the priest running that shelter frequently, actually, as such a redemptive leader. But unfortunately, her son didn't make it. And so, you know, she showed me pictures of this child, and she's just, you know, asking me, have I ever lost a child? And that obviously sticks with you forever. You know, I imagine her face. I still have a sketch of a Crayola sketch that one of her migrant, you know, people living at the shelter did for her. And, you know, we heard another story as well from an immigrant living in Texas that also cared for a daughter with special needs. So I think for me, it was just another reminder of, you know, really vulnerability and the lack of safety net that these communities have, whether that be an economic safety net. You know, I think about even during 2020, you know, Noonday got access to the PPP. You know, we got some emergency funds that came in. And I think about even our public school system here that is set up to really I mean, we have a long way to go around inclusion for kids with special needs, but we really have made so much strides in America to create space for people with differences. And I think, you know, it's just, we talk about vulnerable people, but really to hear those stories of what creates that vulnerability. It's like anything extra that might happen, a death, gang violence, a loss of job, a flood, a bad year for crops, whatever it might be. I mean, that is why people end up fleeing their situations. And so, yeah, those stories really stuck out with me. And again, just working on the preventative side, it gave me, you know, Noonday's had a hard couple of years. We're all about gathering women in homes, which people have not been doing. Thankfully, we're gathering again. And I believe that, you know, we're going to get through the time that we've been in. But I think at that time in particular, for me, I needed to be reminded of the work that I get to do with Noonday and that it's worth it, because it is challenging, but it's worth it.
Yeah. And I think what you were saying is just when you are already a vulnerable person and something on top of that happens, you are then there more vulnerable than in that moment. Whereas, like you said, it's like, oh yeah, okay, we can apply for PPE, or we can, if we know something's coming, we all run to the stores, and we all, what a privilege it is to be able to like stock up on stuff. Mm-hmm. And then you go and you meet people who don't have options.
Right.
And I think a lot of the narrative in this country is because of your lack of option, you have no opportunity, and therefore that's on you. And if you just worked harder, if you just followed all the rules, if you just, and then fill in the blank. And what that does is it really doesn't leave any room for compassion. It doesn't leave room for the story, as you were saying. And so yeah, making room for the story is so important. And I think we're all busy moms, and yet saying yes to going to the border and just carving out that time, I'm sure it was really hard to do, logistically challenging and whatnot. But like you said, just sometimes we get compassion fatigue. All of that's going on in Ukraine and Russia right now. We're just like, okay, it's been dragging on. And are we still leaning in? Are we still choosing to care? Are we still choosing to read the stories even when we feel that compassion fatigue? So I guess my last question to you is, for those women who are kind of on the outside of this issue and haven't really leaned into the vulnerability of immigrants and refugees, what would be your encouragement to them?
It isn't an issue, it really is people. And so I do think that, you know, once you start, I love how you shared about what does it look like for when an immigrant is arriving at an airport. And I think when you begin to say, I'm not going to have compassion fatigue, I'm going to begin to see these people. It might be going and grocery shopping in a different neighborhood that you live in. Because let me tell you, there are immigrants everywhere, especially in some of our small towns. Yes. You can even go back and listen to the Going Scared podcast. I've had 2 immigrants work on our executive team at Noonday Collection, and then interviewed one, Arturo, who fled political unrest in El Salvador. And it was this small Midwestern town in Kansas that just took him in. And, you know, even by the time his mom and him arrived, they had bought a mobile home. The whole town had rallied together to purchase them. And these are all people that, you know, were on a certain side of the political spectrum, and yet they demonstrated compassion. And I think that unfortunately the narrative really shifted over the last few years, where we made this an issue instead of about just people. And so, you know, I think it's really powerful if you're like, well, I don't have any immigrants in my community, or, you know, you do. And once you start to just open your heart to actually seeing people, you'll begin to see them, whether you're at the airport or whether you just go to a different grocery store. I remember when I was actually writing a chapter in my book, Imperfect Courage, about this, about compassion fatigue, about how do we go across these bridges. And I was actually in Colorado, and I was in Fort Collins, which is a very nice community. Okay. It's epic. It's gorgeous. And I was staying in someone's home while they were traveling. And I was like, well, what do you do if you live in Fort Collins and like you want to get to know an immigrant, you know, like what do you even do? Because there's none here. And I went out driving around, and lo and behold, there is a Mexican grocery store, you know, like on the outskirts. So there are these people, you know, so begin to look for them and begin to just, you know, extend yourself, just begin to look people in the eyes. And I think once you begin to look at people in the eyes and even start a conversation, you know, I just did it. My family and I, went to Yosemite for spring break, and there were so many different languages there, so many different languages. I couldn't believe it. And so we would pass a couple people, and I would say, what language are you speaking? And I had two guys say, we're speaking Turkish. Oh, how long have you been living in America? Well, 8 years. You know, my friend's coming to visit me from Turkey, and just got to say, I hope you're having a great time. Met some other people that Portuguese and, you know, Spanish. Oh, are you speaking Spanish? No, I'm speaking Portuguese. And so it's just treating people like humans. It's personhood. It's personhood, you know, and that is the story of Christianity. You know, if there is one narrative that just has us stand out against all the other world religions, it is this imago Dei, that we are each created in the image of God. And so what are you doing every day to acknowledge that image bearer in the person in front of you? And, you know, technology is like taking this away. And even, you know, I would rather you go and find a person than even read a story on the internet. You know, I mean, that would be my desire for each of y'all that are tuning in right now, is ask God, like, this week, God, can you just show me someone that is not from America that might be feeling like the other right now? And help me just look them in the eyes and say, hey, what's your story? How are you? Because most people that are coming into these countries, coming from countries into America, they're coming from places where people are a lot more proximate and a lot more used to these human interactions. And so, you know, a lot of this is reacculturating us, kind of how we used to be, you know, this village life that America used to be, and how can we bring that human connection to people, and just go. I promise, okay, you can DM me if I'm wrong, okay, but you're gonna meet someone that needs to share their story. I just went on a big sermon. That was a long.
I love it. I mean, here's your box. Go ahead and stand on it. I love it. I love it. Well, I mean, a lot of times when we're talking about immigration and asylum seekers, it gets real bogged down in politics real quick, and partisan narratives. And that's what we want to pull up from. We want to pull up and out of that and say, sure, there are things in public policy that we should really be engaging with, because politics and public policy, they affect people, they affect our neighbors, and they affect neighbors that we do not know, but there are injustices happening to our own neighbors that we just don't know about. And so a lot of people will say the number one question we get at Women of Welcome is, well, what can I do? Anytime there's a crisis, especially what just happened in Ukraine and Russia, and they're saying, what can I do? What can I do? And everything feels so very far away.
It does.
And I think for those of us who have entered into these human dignity spaces, I mean, the reality is we just know so deeply that there is no silver bullet.
Right.
It's a collection of things. It's a collective response to some of these things. And so it might not feel like it's helping to go and visit a Ukrainian congregation here in your town. And you might be like, I don't know if I even have a Ukrainian church in town. Well, have you Googled it? You know, it's like, I where do I even start? Google's a great place to start, right? And so there's this beautiful story, and I can't remember who covered it, but it was the week after the invasion happened in Ukraine, and there was a Ukrainian church, I think it was in New York City, and that very first Sunday, the back half of the church was all Koreans in the back of the church, and they were a neighboring church across town, and they had all come to just stand in the back and show solidarity and pray. And so while you don't think that that's fixing what's happening at the border, something is fixing it here.
Yes.
something is fixing relationally and humanly. Something is
Mhm.
happening there. And then because of that, something else happens. It's a chain reaction.
It
It puts
is.
you in close proximity to people and their pain.
Yes.
And therefore, you know how to advocate more holistically and more effectively for those people. So a lot of times it's like, just tell me what I can do, where I can write the check. And what I would just very humbly tell you is sometimes it's not about writing the check. There's
Right.
obviously great dire need. And I think at Women of Welcome, we've kind of suggested great places. And we know World Relief is working with churches all along the Ukrainian border there. And they're a great place to donate. But a lot of times it's really just, how can you show up and actually, if you do care enough to write a check, if you do care enough to pay attention, do you care enough to go across town?
And feel really awkward and uncomfortable. Like,
yes.
If it doesn't feel weird and uncomfortable and awkward, then
you're probably doing it wrong.
You're doing it wrong, you know? So this does feel weird, people. It does. Yes. But yeah, it's how can you approximate yourself?
Yeah, I think I get a little intimidated. And people feel like, wait, you get intimidated? And I'm like, yes, I have fear factor. And I'm always like, okay, dead air space, conversational space. I don't know necessarily all the things to say. And so I just get paralyzed. I can't invite that person over. I couldn't go there because I wouldn't know what to do. Just show up. I think a lot of times the Lord is just like, this isn't like about you creating a perfect situation and scenario. This is about your presence and you showing up with me, because I'm already there. It's not like you're bringing me to a certain place or to a certain people, but I'm already there. And so just like meet me there and love on people that I've created. So I hope that's a bit of encouragement as well.
I hope so too. It encourages me. It encourages me.
Well, anything else that you would love to share with women about your border trip that you were just like, this is, I can't leave without saying this. Is there anything else, or have we covered it?
You know, I feel like we covered. I mean, I could go on and on about the priest that was running that just amazing shelter. And I will say, to leave you with his words, when I asked him, so is your goal here to help them, become immigrants? Is your goal here to help them? And he said, my goal here is that they would flourish as human beings and that they would stay safe and that they would be safe, So, it's just beautiful to meet people that are, famous on social media for being, social justice advocates. They're actually like doing the work quietly in their corner of the world.
Yeah. I mean, this priest, he does not have an Instagram account with, 500,000 followers. I mean, he should, because my goodness, to highlight the work, it would be, just amazing. But I did love that too. And I feel like that is a very common thing when you have, Christians on the other side of the border, and they're saying, I'm not trying to get them anywhere. I'm trying to keep them safe.
Yes.
I'm trying to affirm the dignity that the Lord has already bestowed to them, because they are created in the image of God. And so it's not, I'm giving dignity to somebody. It's, I'm either giving dignified work or I'm affirming your dignity.
Right. And that's right.
And so whether that's on the other side of the border or that's with someone in your neighborhood or someone in your state or in your country, I feel like that's something that we could all do better, is affirm the dignity of others. And showing up is one of the biggest ways to do that.
You can show up. Go check out Noonday Collection. That is one way you can show up today.
Yes. Where's this one from?
That's from Kenya. Those are made by, a community of women, actually, really. During the pandemic, they got to make those necklaces, even though everyone was shuttered. So it brought a lot of hope to them.
Wow. Well, Jessica, thank you just for taking time, and then also just for what you do. I mean, I think in your position, it can be kind of lonely sometimes, and you just wonder, okay, like I'm doing all this, I'm helping do all this great stuff. And I think the pandemic, like you said, has just been kind of hard on your artisans and on you. And again, Women of Welcome loves what Noonday is doing. We think that's on the prevention side of having to have forced migration happen. And so go ahead and check out Noonday today and see what you might be able to do to support an artisan across the world who's working in dignified places that Noonday is doing an excellent job supporting.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Guys.
Thanks for having me.
Yes.
Keep it up. Keep it up. Bye.
Bye.